Hello friends, welcome back to Innovation in Marketing and Marketing of Innovation, and now we are moving towards positioning of innovation. How to position innovation. You see, innovation in itself is something which is in, it remains in an evolutionary phase for a time, for a while at least. If we are continuously innovating upon, then definitely it keeps on evolving. We have seen that. We have seen that, and if we look at marketing process with the perspective of innovation, then definitely we have to keep evolving in the marketing process. But I am not talking of that. I am talking of innovations with reference to products and services. And we realized, we keep on doing that. In the preceding two sections when we were talking about services, you would have realized that services have to be seen with a continued effort in terms of bringing innovation on board and evolutionary perspective on innovation. So if innovation is evolving in itself, can you fix or can you position it at the stage where it has reached to at that particular point? It might not be that right an approach, because if you fix it somewhere and that evolves into a different kind of a thing basically. For example, you remember in the last sections when we were talking about, or last to last section when we were talking about Spotify, then there was a quote by the CEO who says that it's an audio company basically. They are facilitating audio in terms of music and podcasts. And I talked about one very interesting element, that if somehow they can take us from music to podcasts and podcasts to music. For example, I am listening to a podcast, and this the keywords which I like, or I am pausing upon, or I am trying to re-listen to those keywords, or somehow AI is noticing that, and they take me towards a particular kind of a music association with those keywords, and those kind of songs are flashed at me, that these are the songs which are having the context of those keywords. And the same thing happens vice versa. This is just an example. For example, I am liking a particular kind of a song, and that song is taking me towards few podcasts. Or let's say I am listening to a ghazal, and if that thing, if I am liking that, so that takes me towards a podcast wherein the similar kinds of words or similar kinds of couplets or shares are being demonstrated, and they are being talked about, which actually makes me like it more in terms of, as far as the whole scenario of being associated with that thing goes. But coming back to the subject, audio, that is what we are providing. So the flexibility in terms of positioning of Spotify is leading them towards different kinds of stages which they are evolving through in terms of innovation of services scope. Imagine that when we were rising towards developing large infrastructure in the form of National Program for Technology Enabled Learning, NPTEL, SWAYAM, online courses like Coursera is doing, and then offline also huge infrastructure in terms of larger institutions which are coming up and continuously getting dwelled upon, we would have at that particular moment imagined two larger things, that we, though we belong to a particular kind of a value chain, but then we are part of a large value network. I have talked about that. And if we are part of a large value network somehow, then the partners of the network, how would they enable the product and the services which I would be marketing, and how I would be enabling their marketing efforts. So that is one part which somehow we should, if we could have imagined, because that would have actually enabled a flexibility in positioning of whole of the scenario. As far as the complete structure goes, product and services are the representation of this structure, remember. That is one part. So if we would have done that. The second is that many a times at the beginning of the journey, when we were initiating a product or a service, at that particular stage, if we would have sort of imagined the complete life cycle, or a long life cycle of the product, and we would imagine that yes, at this juncture, if we have to position our product and services in X manner, then while leading it towards the next kind of a stage, we might, say something else which would not be extremely different, but would justify the evolutionary phase of the innovation of our product and services, meaning thereby that we would have imagined the innovation which we might be thinking or might come up in due course of time with reference to our products and services. If we would have imagined that, then there might be, there, I would not say there might not be the concept of repositioning, which we often do at the end of the day. Many a times we reposition our products. Basically, we actually might have been thinking in terms of flexible positioning. That is one part. The second part is, and I have talked about that earlier also, that while we were imagining, we would have been imagining in terms of as far as this flexible positioning, so we would have imagined different stages of the life cycle of the same kind of a, of the same product, originated from one kind of a development, reaching to a stage and becoming new at the, at another stage, and going towards a different life cycle, or let us say extended growth life cycle situation in terms of its evolutionary phase of innovation. I have talked about that in PLC as well. So, but here the most important, and in that session I mentioned that I would be talking about as far as flexible positioning scenario goes, as far as the whole situation is. So, you see, the most important element is how to imagine flexibility within positioning all through the journey, and that is what we would be talking about through and through with reference to the networking perspective or network perspective which we are dwelling upon. That is one part, and evolutionary phases of our products and services which would happen in due course of time. It's all a matter of envisioning a journey of innovation. It's all a matter of being at the hem of the affairs. I remember when online kind of education system was being developed and was being dwelled upon, at that time lot of resistance was there in terms of from all the sides, that how that would become so effective in due course of time. Today we have augmented those kind of things in due course of time, and we have realized that we have come a long way, because in this case we were imagining the evolutionary phases of online education system all through, and we kept on positioning it with reference to an addition to whatever you are achieving at this moment, a baseline education system which you might go through without going to school, and so on. We had different kinds of advantages and usage associated with one kind of a service, and that we have talked about in NPTEL in my last session as well. But here try and imagine that when we were dwelling upon this complete infrastructure, the end usage we were imagining in terms of as far as positioning the products, this product or service goes, was the professional outcome, because that was the most tangible kind of an exit which we were thinking in terms of putting it in front of the learners. Could we have done something else or included something else in terms of positioning the outcome of education? If we would have done that, then definitely there would have been different kinds of elements associated with education itself. You see, it's ironical many a times, and I would not say I do not personally subscribe to that, but whole of the education system is now considered an outcome based, professional outcome based kind of a thing. So that is good, but again the point is that enables the student to just focus upon the limited knowledge earning. I don't say that everyone does that, but limited knowledge sphere, and coupling it with particular kind of a skill set to get a particular kind of a professional outcome, and then start the journey. It would have been much better that if somehow it would have gone through a larger flexible positioning space, wherein all sorts of knowledge and how it would come would have been imagined, how it would have to be used in due course of time, and somehow people would be traversing through their lives with the help of this whole education system goes. It was there earlier. Institutions having larger history as that of IIT Roorkee, 176 years old institution, we had that earlier as well, this flexible positioning perspective as far as the outcomes go. And if you will look into the, if you will talk to the alumni of these kind of institutions, platinum jubilee and golden jubilee functions happen all the time. If you will talk to them, you would realize that they would say that I have learned this, I have learned that, so many things, and these are the outcomes which came out of it, and job and good life was just a particular kind of a phase associated with that. But now it has been fixed. So what is the, I would not say repercussion, but what is the result when you fix it somehow, as far as something which always is in an evolutionary phase, as that of engineering or managerial education goes, and several other kinds of education systems or education thing goes. When this happens, then if you are launching a particular kind of a course which would definitely be very useful, then you would realize that along with this course you have to associate a professional outcome. And if somehow that professional outcome is not very evident to the learners, to the students, they might not be coming for this kind of a course, however useful it may be in due course of time, because somehow it is not fetching that kind of that level of a salary at that particular moment, or professional outcome at that particular moment. Same kind of a flexibility you have to put up in front of the organizations who would be hiring your students. Otherwise they might might not look at it with the perspective of usage of these kind of courses for their organizations. And here I am talking about learners as the takers, not the customers, but organizations as the customers and learners as the products, definitely. So you see, my intent is to for you to think, to emphasize, for you to think that somehow this has to be foreseen within evolutionary perspective all through. For example, newspapers, news channels, are they the content providers or newscasters or news providers or news avenues? Thin line. But if they are content providers, then definitely they would have a different kind of a sphere using similar kind of content for different kinds of usage, or different kinds of perspective, or different kinds of knowledge avenues for different kinds of people at one single go. You would say that this is happening, Google is trying to do that, and many newspapers, they have different sections for different kinds of people and so on. But that evolved, that happened, and it is not being rightly positioned as of now. For example, you carry a newspaper in your hand at this moment and tell me that what do you think about this particular newspaper. Most of the newspapers, you would realize, for current news, for local news, or for political news, and for that matter some sports news. But to gain knowledge, are you looking at newspapers with the perspective of gaining knowledge and references? Newspapers would have become the biggest source of references, especially in terms of history and science and several kinds of discussions, because so many good authors, they have been writing in newspapers. And many a times we would have included much larger number of such authors to write in newspapers along with the journals they are publishing in. So here this is an important element of, as far as flexibility at the initial stage, as far as the whole scenario goes. So flexibility at the initial stages of, as far as when we are starting the journey of innovation, with reference to positioning, as we have taken the example of, as far as newspaper goes, courses go, tourism, specific targeted perspective around the place people are visiting. If we would have been flexible in terms of, as far as the tourism goes, if we would have been guiding tourists and we would have lived with their experience anywhere for that matter, a religious place, a different place, a hill station, and if we would have done that, and if we would have collated that with the upcoming changes in the world, for example environmental consciousness requirements with reference to environment, climate change and so on, things would have been extremely different, believe me. So you see, at large, we definitely have to, when we are specifically talking in terms of, as far as marketing of innovations go, we have to be extremely flexible as far as the positioning perspective goes. So did you know Instagram was initially launched as a photo sharing app in 2010, primarily for users to share square shaped filtered images with their followers. However, over the years, Instagram has evolved its positioning to become a versatile social media platform that encompasses various types of content and communication methods, video, stories, reels, messages, shopping. And believe me, Instagram thought about this earlier. They have not repositioned themselves, they have evolved alongside their innovation in terms of as far as their positioning goes. This is a very important example. And you see, whenever I look at these kind of products like Segway personal transporter, I imagine that this could have been very successful as far as the whole scenario goes. And sometimes, nowadays, for example, for quite some months I have been walking in the campus, which is good, healthy, I like it, but sometimes when I have to hush up, I could have used this kind of a product somewhere. So the Segway personal transporter was the original product developed by Segway Incorporated, and it was introduced to the market in the early 2000s. For this we are using a reference which is given on the slide. So it was initially marketed as a revolutionary means of urban transportation and was expected to have a significant impact on how people move around cities. This definitely would have changed a scenario. Cycles, they are doing good. EVs are coming up, but EVs would have got a very specific competition within cities, and the city where I belong to, for example, at this moment, Roorkee, apart from campus, it's quite crowded outside, and if we would have this kind of a product alongside and some small carrier near the handle basically, so I would have happily gone to the market to purchase few things as far as the scenario goes, and so on. So you see, as I said, it was initially marketed as a revolutionary means of urban transportation and was expected to have a significant impact on how people move around cities. However, its widespread adoption of personal commuting purposes did not materialize as expected. The Segway personal transporter indeed faced challenges in the market due to various factors, including its positioning and public perception. They would have imagined it, and they should have imagined it, that how things would change in due course of time in crowded areas, in alleys, in small places, with respect to environment, with respect to the customer consciousness which evolved in due course of time. So you see, they positioned it as a luxury item. The Segway personal transporter was relatively expensive, making it inaccessible for many potential customers. Because the customers, they would have compared that with the other transporting options, and they would have realized that within this money you can buy something else. This high cost position the Segway as a luxury item rather than a practical mode of transportation for masses. Limited use cases. It wasn't a clear solution to a specific problem for most consumers. The Segway was marketed as a solution for urban commuting and short distance travel. It could have been marketed as a transportation solution at large, and they could have demonstrated, you see, and whenever we do retrospective analysis, it is easier said than done, but still, when retrospective analysis is always being done to facilitate the discussion around upcoming things which we are having around us, or to revisit the concepts. So you see, they could have talked about a solution within a sphere of, let's say, 10 kilometers. That could have been slightly easier, and they could have talked about what kind of safety provisions they might include in due course of time. They could have included a leg guard somewhere, and they could have introduced few things which would have reduced the questions alongside as far as the price go. So however, it struggled to find a niche where it could excel. Many consumers found it difficult to justify the purchase of Segway, and so on. The story goes on. Some social issues were there, and regulatory issues definitely were there. Licenses are being introduced, and so on. E-rickshaw, I am not saying it is as good as Segway, but that is an individual kind of a transport, Segway, but e-rickshaw was also having license issues. But then immediately things came up, and people started creating and augmenting situations and policies, and today it's a highly adapted kind of a product which we are using. Look at this product, Taco Bell, good product. Taco Bell was founded by Glenn Bell in Downey, California in 1962. Glenn Bell was inspired by the success of a Mexican restaurant in San Bernardino, California, and decided to create his own concept. He opened the first Taco Bell location with a menu that included tacos, burritos, and other Mexican inspired fast food. The company has made several strategic moves and changes over the years that contributed to its growth and popularity. And here you would realize that they have been flexible since its origin. Taco Bell Taco Bell's success can be attributed to its ability to reposition itself and remain relevant in fast food industry and so on. You see, though they are talking about repositioning itself, but again Taco Bell imagined a flexible positioning since its origin, and they realized that definitely it would be compared with XYZ kind of a product, and they would be going for a product life cycle with this kind of a growth trajectory up till this stage, and after that stage they would be moving towards this. They did not think about changing the position at one part of time. They were imagining that they would be saying something else about their product in due course of time. And do you remember Yo Quiero Taco Bell Chihuahua? So initially this slogan was amusing and came to symbolize Taco Bell's original brand identity, inexpensive Mexican fast food and a frequently parodied mascot. However, the strategy that established the brand as a global name had a limited shelf life. And I remember one of the examples in terms of this umbrella organizations we discussed in earlier discussions. So that is again an example of flexible positioning since the inception of as far as the products like umbrella goes. Please revisit that video and think in terms of flexible positioning in terms of that video. So while remaining a major player in the fast food industry, they recognized the need to carve out a position that could better excite and inspire the customers. The introduction of the immersive new slogan, "Live Mass, Live More," coincided with a series of other adjustments as far as the whole scenario goes. They thought about this, that is why they could do that. Always remember, whenever you are focusing upon repositioning perspective, then there is a huge or substantial dip as far as the sales and other parameters go, and the life cycle stagnates or stabilizes or matures, you may say in technical terms, before you try to reposition and take it towards growth trajectory. But if an organization is not moving towards as far as maturity or stabilizing a status goes, it is moving towards growth, slightly fixing it or slightly becoming sort of saturated, I would not say, slightly matured after a particular kind of a stage, and immediately goes towards the growth trajectory, that means that somehow they have been thinking in terms of flexibility in positioning since the beginning of the as far as the product goes. Opening upscale Taco Bell cantina locations with urban restaurant design and open kitchen, a custom an open kitchen, a custom menu, shareable appetizers, and even alcoholic beverages and so on, which I don't subscribe to personally. So menu experiments including breakfast options and the stylish Doritos, Locos, Tacos and so on, and there were several things which were brought in terms of alongside the flexibility in positioning goes, and the source is mentioned at the foot of the slide. Menu innovations were done. Value proposition was brought in, wherein Taco Bell has positioned itself as an affordable option in the fast food industry, and Segway could not do that. The company's value menu, where customers can get a variety of items at a low price, has been a significant driver of its success and so on. The case study actually emphasizes upon the fact that Taco Bell was imagining in terms of as far as their evolutionary phases all through, although and you see in fast foods there is lot of scope of innovation within that product. So Taco Bell was knowing about these kind of innovations they will bring in as far as the product goes, and how to flexibly position that in due course of time of this evolution they were imagining at that time. Breakfast menu, marketing campaigns were emphasizing upon that and so on. The new rules for bringing innovations to market, and here I would summarily talk about as far as the network effect goes, as well as or relationship of flexible positioning with the networking perspective goes, or as far as value networks and value webs which we are talking of in due course of time. So encouraging consumers to embrace innovations is becoming increasingly challenging, and we are referring to Chakravarti B 2014, the new rules of bringing innovations to market, Harvard Business Review. a very interesting paper which talks about how this whole scenario, how to break into network markets, and how network markets can be seen with the perspective of innovations, scope of innovations, as well as flexible positioning. So encouraging consumers to embrace innovations is becoming increasingly challenging, as the author says. And in today's business landscape, the extensive interconnections between companies mean that the adoption of new product by one player often hinges on its systematic adoption by other interconnected players. And that is where the most important element is: adoption by other interconnected players. Take for instance the various companies that played a role in popularizing digital photography, including software vendors, camera manufacturers. These kind of people are involved in digital photography. So software vendors are involved, camera manufacturers are there, broadband communication companies are involved there, printer manufacturers are there, and so forth. All of these people are responsible for one kind of a product, or one kind of a service. In stark contrast, when it came to popularizing film photography, Kodak was essentially the sole player involved. So this is the kind of thing which we have to look at when we are talking of value networks and value webs. And as I said, I would be summarily talking about this. So the conventional strategies that executives employ to introduce products, like identifying distinct customer segments or creating compelling value propositions, are not as effective in this modern landscape. Authors talk about this kind of a thing when talking of networked markets. So instead, innovators must orchestrate a change of behaviors across the market. How you may increase the business of your value chain partners, as well as value network partners or value network associates and people in organizations in value webs. So unraveling the status quo so that a large number of players adopt their offerings and believe they are better off for having done so. There is a 4-part framework for doing just that: reason back from a target endgame, backward thinking, or no, not in literal terms backward thinking, but thinking from that end to this end. Complement the power players, offer coordinated switching incentives, and preserve flexibility. And this is the key word, ladies and gentlemen, as far as the whole flexibility scenario goes. And it's a very interesting example which this paper talks about in terms of Movie Link, a collaboration between major studios MGM, Paramount, Sony, Universal, and Warner Bros., offering video on demand services with an extensive digital movie library. And this explains a lot in terms of as far as the whole situation goes. And the author Bhaskar Chakravarti talks about once enough players in a networked market decide to switch to a new product, everyone else's motivation to do so becomes stronger. Markets are networked, and the element of flexibility has to be induced within the complete situation. If you fix it, then whole of the situation would experience the same fixation in terms of as far as the scenario goes. So I would be taking you towards the last part, most importantly as far as the whole scenario we are discussing here in terms of networked markets. So the most important point, apart from the preceding three, and those preceding three just to re-mention about, is reason back from target endgame. That is, to break into networked markets, companies should not choose strategies because of the immediate benefit that might come with them, or be tempted to follow the they say Napoleonic counsel, once engage at puis on voi, jump in the fray and find out what happens. That is how author describes that, so which is so dear to entrepreneurial spirit. So instead, sensible companies think several steps ahead and work back from the end game they want. Envisage the market equilibrium you want and implement only those strategies that will create that equilibrium. So that is one end. Complement the power players. That is how one must look at. And he elaborates upon that by saying, position your innovation as a complementary product to those of the most influential players in the network. This will give you immediate access to many other players in the network. This might be a strategic perspective which we may think of in terms of when we are marketing innovations. Then the third element, offer coordinated switching incentives. That is, change the behavior of players that add to the innovation's benefits, and that is very important. Channel partners and would be adopters by aligning their incentives to switch to your offering. So, incentivizing the reason, and we have talked about that earlier as well. And the last part, which is the most important, emphasizing part, the innovator bases every potential endgame on its expectations about events that will happen or on the behavior of other players, which creates uncertainty. Hence, the innovator must build flexibility into its plans, flexibility into plans and flexibility in terms of positioning. Ideally, organizations should establish product and marketing plans that cover a variety of situations, and that is the most important element which we have been dwelling upon since the beginning of this session. The author says that design your product and marketing plans so they can be easily modified to adapt the market changes. That means envision those, envision the evolutionary phases your innovation would go through and steer it accordingly. Be flexible in positioning. I would be coming back to you with a discussion on new product development, specifically with reference to innovations, and then focusing a bit on monetization, or should I say commercialization, of those new or innovative products, or innovation in terms of new product development, how to monetize and commercialize those in due course of time. And after that, I would be summarizing the whole course with two more aspects which I would be bringing in front of you. I will be catching up back with you. Till then, goodbye.